Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. My name is Saima and welcome to Saima's Experience. Really quick, I know I haven't been posting as often as I normally do, but I am, building a new studio right now. It's totally under construction, as you guys can see, so it's taken away from my time a little bit, but I am working on new projects, and so hopefully things will get streamlined here in the next couple weeks, and then I'll be back to my regular schedule and we'll be posting far more often. So I've missed you guys. I hope you guys have been doing well, and hopefully your rentals have been doing well as well. That was a lot of wells. Okay, this video is going to be about listing unusual or rare cars on Turo, especially in this day and age where there has been this just major change in the automotive industry, where there's all these new cars that are coming out. A lot of old cars are being remade. There's new makes and models, and now there's new brands out there as well. So it's just very exciting times in the car industry. But how does that translate over to listing a particular type of car on the Turo platform? Now, I get messages all the time from people asking me about listing specific cars on Turo and what my thoughts are. So of course, there's very cool cars that get a lot of attention these days, such as the new Broncos. There's going to be, of course, with like Tesla, the Cybertruck coming out. There are new EV brands in the market like Rivian, who has these amazing, crazy cool trucks. Lucid Air, Toyota has brought back old models like the Supra. I know Acura is going to come out with the Integras again. So it's just very cool times. But is there a business model behind these cars that financially makes sense when you list them on Turo? So you want to be very careful when you're choosing a car to list, because just because it's popular in, the automotive world or online or whatever it might be, it might not necessarily mean that it's going to make a lot of money when it comes to rental. So I'm going to go over some unusual cars that I've listed on the platform and how they've performed, what you should look at when you're looking for these cars, just to make sure you don't get in a car that is sort of just hyped up and then that hype sort of dies down over time and then you end up losing money on it, because I've seen that happen to a lot of people. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it. Now, my two most unusual cars, at least from my perspective, that I've listed have been the Corvette C8, and I had a 2020 model. I had one of the very first convertible C8s that there were. In my area, I was probably the second or third C8 that was listed on the platform, and it was very new, it was very cool, and of course just an absolutely gorgeous car. The second car that I had listed was a 2017 Vander Venice, and again, I had one of the very early years of the Venice being out, and it was again very cool and very unique, very different, and there was only one other Venice that I had seen listed on the platform in the Southern California area. So very new, trendy, unique cars, right? And thankfully, in these scenarios, I was very lucky that both cars performed very well. And so I went back and I started thinking about, well, what factors did those cars have to guarantee that they were going to do well on the platform over an extended period of time? And just like the C8, that it wasn't going to be a car that was great while it was new and there wasn't that many of them out on the road and people wanted to experience it and test drive it. How was it going to stand the test of time? So I wanted to look at these factors. And then I wanted to go back and I wanted to look at cars that were cool and that were new, that did just come out on the market, like the Jeep Gladiator, the Toyota Supras, the Broncos that are so popular now, and how do they measure up and how will they stand the test of time? Okay, so when it comes to the Corvette C8 and the Vander Venice, now with the Corvette, I had Corvette C7s, the older models, on Turo's platform for almost 6 years, and they consistently did well. So I had personal history of Corvettes performing extremely well. I got to really get to know the customer base and saw that people were just avid Corvette fans. And not only that, but it really enticed the broader sports sports car community because it just had that perceived value and that look to it, right? Not only that, but if I looked through all the markets across the US, Corvette C7s performed really well. There was so much consistency in the number of trips and the amount of years that Corvettes had been listed on Turo all across the board that proved that that car did well. And naturally, that interest carried over to the Corvette C8s that came out because it just had that following. And again, the C8 measured up to a lot of the attributes that the C7 had. It looked great. It had great perceived value. If you were able to place an order for the C8 and get an allocation early on, you were able to get it at sticker. You know, this was before the car market went totally haywire and things were marked up $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. So it was just a great deal in terms of cost of ownership and then the day rates that history suggests from actual data points that we saw on Turo's platform that this car would continue to do well. And in fact, that is what it did. When I first listed my C8, I was having it rented out for almost $500 a day, which was amazing, right? But again, that also came along with scarcity because production was really slowing down with the C8s. There wasn't that many of them out on the road. They were extremely new. People were willing to pay. Now, fast forward a couple years, if you go and look at C8s, yes, they still get decently good day rates, oftentimes in the $200 to $300 range in peak seasons, and then it can come down to, you know, maybe $150, $160, $180. Nonetheless, they still earn a high enough day rate in comparison to their cost of ownership where it still makes sense to where you can turn a profit on the platform. So you always have to remember that the business model always has to make sense. There always has to be, you know, a financial gain when you list a car over the long run, right? Now that also happened with the Vander Venice that I had. Again, it was one of those cars that was extremely cheap to own. I think I got that Venice for $28,000. It was brand new at the time. And the day rates that it was getting on the market was very high. Now, in my opinion, looking back, the Vander was, of course, a much riskier bet because there wasn't that much proof in the marketplace. The only reason why I opted in to do that Venice was because there was one Venice on the marketplace. I rented that Venice from the host and I had an extensive conversation with him about how his Venice was performing, how frequently it was rented, the day rate that he was getting, and that host was phenomenal and he was, more than open with sharing details with me. So I couldn't find all the data I was looking for on the platform, but I was able to get those data points from the host and it turned out to be very true because they were so unique and there wasn't that many on the marketplace. They continued to fetch a very high day rate and of course they also offer a very unique experience. Now that isn't always the case with unique cars. Now I remember being on the Turo platform when the Jeep Gladiators came out and those were really, really popular. People were super excited to get into them, to list them on Turo. And unfortunately, these were one of those cars or trucks that in the beginning, they were getting very high day rates. I think I was seeing them at somewhere around 180 to 200 to 220 per day. And over time, for whatever reason, they just didn't hold that much interest from the renter market, and they ended up really dropping down in day rates. And now oftentimes I'll see them, $65 a day, $80 a day. And it's just really surprising when those rates fall very quickly. Now, why is that? Why does that happen to some cars? So just really quick, what ended up happening to my C8 that performed extremely well on Turo for me is that I ended up selling it at the height of the used car market, which was towards, I think, the end of last year. I forget exactly when it was, but I got a crazy offer for it. It was almost 30% above what I purchased the car for, and it was just too good to say no. And in hindsight, I'm glad I took the deal. It was extremely profitable, so I had to part ways with it. Good news is now there are tons of C8s available, so I can always get back into one, and I absolutely would list another one on Turo. And then for my Vander Venice, if you've been following me for a while, then you already know what happened to the Venice, but it was unfortunately totaled in a horrible accident involving a Turo renter. And luckily everyone was okay. Here's a photo of it. By some miracle, everyone came out unscathed. So I just want to drop these tidbits in really quick. Some cars, I think, have that factor of novelty to them. They're new, people want to test them out. But if somebody is going to rent a Jeep, what are the odds that they're going to rent, maybe a Sahara or just your Wrangler, the iconic Jeeps over a Gladiator? And that seems to be the trend. Jeeps have held very strong rental trends in the market. They continue to consistently rent out versus Gladiators, which really fell off, right? So I think that sometimes cars like that, they can be popular in the moment and they do cater to an audience that is curious about them. But overall, because there's not enough history on them and it shows that they have a competitor like the average Jeeps that you have, that people prefer to just go with what is more well-known, which is your average Jeep. So you really just want to do research. And I would say, don't be the first one to get into a car and put it on the market if there is no data on a market on a particular car, because it can be very, very risky. And if there isn't enough data, definitely network with other hosts in your area or somebody who has that car to try and collect those data points. Now, another car that I sort of see this happening with, it is a little early to tell, but I think it's going to follow a very similar curve, is the Ford Broncos that came out. Now, yes, there are multiple versions of these Broncos that are going to come out, everything from, the low-level sport to your regular, very cool looking Bronco, and then you're going to have your Badlands and your Raptor and all the other versions that come, right? It's interesting to see the market get flooded with the sport, and that is sort of the lower end version. And right now I see on average it's getting anywhere from $75 to $118 per day, whereas your sort of iconic Bronco, I don't know how to word it, is getting anywhere between $100 to $140 per day on average. And so when you get into these cars, of course, they're all very cool. You just want to make sure that you're always doing the math on the high end and the low end, that you're always looking at best case scenario and worst case scenarios, because sometimes these cars can follow an arc when it comes to that day rate. Once the market becomes saturated or there isn't as much long-term interest in these cars, then those day rates can really fall off, which of course will eat away at your profit margin. So you always want to take into account when you do your homework on the marketplace and you go look at other cars for data points. Okay, if they're getting $75 per day, and let's just say, they're on the middle plan for Turo's host protection, which is the 75%, what is their take home at the end of the day? Use a car loan calculator off of Google, see what an average payment looks like plus insurance, and start working the math on it backwards. Now, I can walk you through all of this. I have an entire course on how to set up your Turo business, how to do market research, and how to calculate your margins and your expenses. You can go to powerhost.club to learn more about it. But it's really, really important. And the reason why I wanted to put out this video today is because there are tons of really cool cars coming out. I think Turo also advertises these cool cars more and more, which may make it seem like it's a good idea to get into something unique, which oftentimes it absolutely can be, and it can work out extremely well and get you really high margins, but sometimes it can also not work. So you really have to do your market research, because you cannot forget, when you get into a business like Turo, it is such a financial commitment. And it is quite long-term, right? At least a couple years, if not over the life of a loan, which could be 5 or 6 years, that you want to make sure that you go into it with such precision and accuracy that you don't end up in a situation with where you have a lot of financial liability and a lot of financial risk. And unfortunately, this just isn't talked about enough, but it is the truth of being in a business like this. It can be highly profitable, but if you choose the wrong type of car, it could also get you in a lot of financial trouble. And given that we could potentially be going into a recession, you really want to be mitigating risk as much as you possibly can in your financial life. And Turo is a fantastic business to be in as long as you're going into it with getting the right cars. So again, you can check out powerhost.club to learn more about that. Now, what are some cool cars that I think are coming out that I personally believe are going to do really well on the platform? There's one that comes to mind, and I think that's going to be the Tesla Cybertruck. I have an order on it, but who knows when that's going to come. I think that's one of those cars because it's a Tesla. Tesla does extremely well on the Turo platform, and pretty much most Teslas in terms of driving experience and technology are very similar. It doesn't really vary other than the body of the car. People feel extremely comfortable because they've learned Teslas, they know about it now, and so when that Cybertruck comes out, it's like a Tesla but with a crazy cool factor to it. So I think Cybertrucks are going to do extremely well. People are going to be excited to get their hands on them, and especially if you can get one early onto the platform, you're going to fetch an extremely high day rate on that. So that's an exciting one. I know Corvette's going to come out with a C9, and I think that that will also be extremely popular. And right now, one of the obvious trends in the automotive industry is so many automakers coming out with EV versions of their vehicles, right? So it's like now we have the electric Porsche Taycan, and that's just going to continue to happen because a lot of these companies have pledged to go all electric in a certain time frame. The Corvette C9 is going to be the first all electric Corvette. So it's going to be interesting because over time, people are going to become more comfortable with the idea of driving electric cars. So these cars will perform well. But it's just that right now, if you go and you list, for example, a Porsche Taycan on the platform, they don't do so well because not that many people are familiar with them. And that's how Teslas were as well. I had a 2013 Tesla Model S on Turo many years ago when I first started. And initially it was extremely slow. But as more and more Teslas came onto the market, people familiarized with themselves, it started performing extremely well. So sometimes there is, just that learning curve. And if you're an early adopter like I am, it's not necessarily profitable when you want it to be. So you want to just take that stuff into account and think of it, from a grand scheme of things, big picture, people are still learning about newer cars. And then also, why are people renting off the platform? Yes, some of it is for an experience and adventure, but some of it is people just want practicality because they're traveling and they want to be something that they're comfortable with. So you just want to think about all of these things as you get into cars now more than ever. It's extremely important. The more precise you are and the more homework you do on your market and you find those data points that really support your decision in getting a specific type of car, the better you're going to do. I promise you that. So thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, I have missed you guys. I will be back on a more regular posting schedule, hopefully in the next couple weeks here. But I wanted to bring you guys this because so many people have been asking me this. So I would love to know your take on it. This is just one person's perspective, and maybe you're having a different experience out there, but this is just what I've seen. So thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to talking to you guys down in the comment section below. Hope everybody's been well, and we will talk soon. Take care, everybody. Bye, guys.